Okay, gonna give it one more second. Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to Smart City Kids Executive Function Workshop. My name is Erica Papier, and I am the parent of a second grade boy at Heathcote and a sixth grade girl at Scarsdale Middle School. I know how much juggling goes into each day as a parent, but particularly right now. And we hope that tonight will provide you with insights and practical strategies to implement while our children are spending so much time at home. And I think everyone participating tonight should get extra credit with your child's teacher. So tell them you did something to be helpful. I want to briefly introduce Smart City Kids so that you know we are here if you ever need us. For the past 20 years, Smart City Kids advisors have guided parents and students through the admissions process for entrance into all grades, starting in nursery school, going all the way through college, and including special education. We work with families throughout the New York area, as well as across the globe for families who are relocating. And I know Scarsdale is such an international community. Please feel free to share our name if you ever have a friend or a colleague relocating to either the city or to Westchester. We also have clients who are schools, and we support them with transitions in leadership, admissions and marketing, strategic planning, or anything else they may need. And in addition, we work with a variety of organizations to provide workshops like this one that explain executive function, admissions, financial aid. We do parenting workshops, cover all topics. We also support corporations when they are recruiting new talent by helping to find schools for the relocating families. Last but definitely not least, our advisors offer parenting sessions where we discuss parenting and education related topics. So if you ever find yourself in need of support, which a lot of parents do right about now, we are here for you. We also have a really fantastic group of tutors who support students of any age and any ability if they need extra help. So you can feel free to reach out to me if you would like more details. So I am honored to introduce my most impressive colleague, Dr. Jane Gertler. Dr. Gertler was the director of the Office of Teaching and Learning at the Churchill School and Center, which is a kindergarten through 12th grade school for students with learning disabilities in New York City. And before Churchill, Jane spent more than 20 years as a school administrator here in Westchester, serving as director of special education in Irvington, prior to becoming the director of special education and then director of curriculum, assessment, and professional development in Edgemont. Jane also lived in Scarsdale for 34 years, and her kids went through the Scarsdale school system starting at Quaker Ridge. So Jane will present for around 45 minutes and then leave time for questions. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll make sure to pose them to Jane at the end. So having said all of that, Jane, I will turn the floor over to you, and everyone, you are in for a very productive evening. Thank you.
All right, so thanks very much, Erica. Let's see. So tonight, can everybody I'm assuming everyone can hear me. Can you hear me, Erica? Good. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about a topic that I think, if it isn't, it should be on everybody's mind, especially since March, because it's executive function skills. And although I would say that there are many students, for example, who may struggle with reading. Some kids have difficulty with written expression. Kids may accelerate in all their academic subject areas, but the area that they sometimes don't get the direct instruction in that they need is executive function skills. And you'll see that kids can do really well in elementary school, and then they get to middle school and they start to struggle. And everybody thinks it's because they may have a learning disability, and they don't. It's because of the executive function. So what I'm going to do is take you through the essentials of executive function and provide you with strategies that you can use at home with your students, with your children, I'm sorry. I just did a professional workshop for teachers the other day, so I'm going to share my screen. If you we'll have time, we'll definitely have time for questions, and you can also put them in the chat, and I'll try and get to them that way as well. So if you can just keep yourself on mute, and then I am going to share the screen. I think everybody who said they were attending is in, so here we go. Okay. So, Erica, you're going to be my eyes on this one. So if you can't see the screen, you'll let me know. Okay. So the first slide is actually a quote from Margaret Mead, which I think is terrific. And it's children must be taught how to think, not what to think. And the whole goal of executive function skills, and I really am passionate about it, and in my very long career, I felt that it was one area that sometimes kids did not receive direct instruction in, and they need it just like they do reading and writing and math, is executive function, because that enables kids to think and to work independently and to work through problems and to have plans, and not just to be all over the place or not be a rote learner. That's not what you want your child to be. So instead of first giving you the definition of executive function, here are some questions that have to do with executive function capacities. So how did you remember to log into this webinar today? That takes in the executive function skill of memory and planning and organization. Your family wants to eat dinner at 7 and you're the cook. How do you get the food on the table in time? Executive function. Someone cuts in front of you at the supermarket checkout lane, or somebody gets in your space and is not socially distant. What keeps you from yelling? That has to do with self-regulation, self-monitoring. It's an executive function. The clock is ticking loudly in the room where you are reading a book, but you don't hear it. Why? Executive function, attention. You've been elected the leader of a family Zoom event. Let's see. What do you do? Let me move this. So you have to have, in addition to the technology skills, you have to have all of the skills of organization, planning, making sure that you get on the Zoom call early so that you can see whether or not your microphone is working. If you want to record it, how do you do that? You have to have a list. So of all the steps that you need to do. Those are all these different activities have to do with executive function. And here's the definition that I think serves our purposes. One second. There we go. So an I think this is a good definition because it basically captures what executive function is all about. It's an umbrella term. So if you think of an umbrella for the complex cognitive processes, and we'll go through those processes that control flexible, goal-directed behavior, as well as the coordination and synthesis of many different processes. So a lot of big words, and basically if you think of an orchestra conductor or an air traffic control person, though that's the umbrella, and they are in charge of everything that happens with the orchestra or everything that happens in the air. So the executive function portion of your brain is responsible for all of that goal-directed behavior. Here are 5 components of executive function. And if you look online, you'll see variations of this. Everyone has customized it to their own needs, but it all breaks down to these 5 areas. It would take many, many hours to go through all of these tonight. So I will go through the ones that I think are most important for you to know right now and that have strategies that you can start with your child tomorrow. So organization, and if you think of the questions that I just asked you a moment ago that I had up on the screen, you can see where those questions tie into executive function. So you have organizing and time management, self-monitoring, goal setting, working memory, and cognitive flexibility. And cognitive flexibility really means just perspective taking and being able to accept change. And that's one that a lot of kids have difficulty with. All of this also requires you or your child as a learner to have metacognition skills. And that means for you and for your child to understand how you learn. They need to understand how they learn. And as kids get older, we really should be asking them what they think their strengths and challenges are, not just what shows up on the report card. So it's not in this PowerPoint, but I used it the other day with teachers and they thought it was very helpful. So I'm going to explain it to you as well. So what you can do with your child, and whether your child is in kindergarten or 5th grade at Fox Meadow, it doesn't really matter. You can use a different character, but I think most kids like this character. So what you might want to do is think about a character and think about that character's strengths and challenges. And the one that the teachers and I decided to focus on yesterday was Cookie Monster. So whether you're a kindergartner or a 5th grader, everybody loves Cookie Monster. And what you could do when you want to talk to your child about understanding what their strengths and challenges are, talk first about Cookie Monster or another character that they absolutely love, or somebody that they know, or it could be LeBron James. It could be a famous actress, actor, a sports person, whoever you want. We just thought that Cookie Monster was real enough for kids and benign enough for kids to focus on. And just say to your kid, what do you think some of Cookie Monster's strengths are? What are some of his challenges? So, for example, one of his strengths is that he's determined. One of his challenges is that he has poor nutrition because he's only eating cookies. And you would go through that with your child, helping them. And then once your child has a sense of what strengths and challenges really means, ask your child what they see as their strengths and challenges, or you discuss what you see as your strengths and challenges, because every one of us has our strong points, and we also have areas that we are absolutely challenged with. And I think that's a good start to get kids to start thinking about themselves as a learner. And too often we look at a test result and we decide that this child either did well or didn't do well, but we don't really know why. And if we went and we asked the child before the test what they think they're quote good at and what they're struggling with, we would be able to help them much more effectively. So I would encourage you to have that discussion with your child about metacognition. So the other area that I'm going to just talk about now is, just a second. There we go. Setting goals. So I know it's not quite the beginning of the year, but many of you may have done this with your children at the beginning of the year. And if you haven't, I would encourage you to do this as well. Part of executive function is knowing what that roadmap should look like and setting goals for yourself. And so the approach that I'm going to use towards goals, I'll read this one to you. It says, my can do, and I'll explain can do in a second. My can do goal is making 5 shots in basketball by the end of the school year. So let's look at that goal and see whether it meets certain criteria. Is it clear? Absolutely. It wasn't that the child said, I want to be a better basketball player. Is it achievable? Well, I don't know this child well enough to know whether or not she can make 5 baskets at the end of the year, but she certainly didn't say, I want to make 5 baskets at every game I play. Is it measurable? Absolutely. It's numerical. It's 5 baskets. And then the most important part of this is to consider obstacles. So in the example I showed you, I don't have the list of obstacles, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Jane, there's someone in the waiting room.
Oh,
I
sorry.
kicked off that
So
needs to get let back in. So sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Sorry to pause for a second,
Yeah.
everyone. The beauty of Zoom. Is someone waiting in the waiting room?
They should all be in.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay. Now, how do I get rid of that? Okay, wait. Okay. So we're going to look at goal setting. And the goal is to have school mornings without stress. So that is quite a goal. Is it clear? Yes. We're not saying we just want to have mornings without stress. We're saying we want to have school mornings without stress. So we are being very specific. So what happens on Saturday and Sunday? Not part of this goal. Is it achievable? Well, you know your family, so if you set this goal, you would know whether or not you thought there was a chance that this would actually happen. Is it numerical? You're going to have some steps, and your doable steps will then be measured, so you'll know whether or not it's numerical. Let me just let somebody else in. Sorry. And then doable and obstacles. So what I want to do here, and again, this is something that I don't think parents should be saying, okay, here's a goal we have. We're going to have school mornings in the Gertler household without stress. So first we're going to do A, B, and then B and C and D. And here it is, John, and go for it. That's not how you should set up a goal with your child. What you should do is plan this with your child. Talk about goal setting with your child. Make a chart or something that they can absolutely see. And the goal is, if this is something that you want to do, school mornings without stress. So when you get to if you wanted it to be achievable and you felt that, you know what, this is really not going to be so easy, you could do Monday mornings without stress. Monday and Tuesday mornings without stress. You can start small. And again, just like any goal, you want it to be achievable. So if you think that a full week of mornings without stress is not achievable, start smaller. If this reminds any of you about goal setting, if somebody's ever trying to lose weight, nobody says, well, I need to lose 30 pounds. It's like, I want to lose 5 pounds. You have to start with something that's more realistic and achievable. So here are some steps that you might want to give hints to your child and work on them with your child. The first is really to plan ahead. In order to have a school morning without stress, you want to see how much can you do the night before. And so again, that's not just goal setting, that's also about organization and time management. You and your child will decide on the essential steps, and you will use visual prompts, especially for children in your family who are not reading. So if you want to have, if one of the steps when, let's say, is to have their backpacks ready, you're going to have a picture of a backpack by the front door of the house if they're physically going to school. Or if they have to set up what I'll call their workstation at home, you're going to have a picture of what that workstation will look like so that they know that that has to be ready in the morning for school. And then you're going to create some incentives. I am of the school of rewards. Nobody's buying their kid a car. or the latest bicycle or Peloton, etc. But there certainly are incentives that you can plan with your child if you can have school mornings without stress. And then you're also going to think of obstacles. And this is what gives this, can-do goal model, this approach, its power. And that's the O, that's thinking about the obstacles. So if you are planning a school morning without stress, you could say to your child, well, what's one obstacle that could stand in our way? If your child can't come up with any, then how about, we forgot to set the alarm clock. We forgot to tell Alexa what time to wake us up. We didn't set our phone with the alarm. So then, all right, well, what should we do about that? Well, we need to make sure, maybe for some kids, it's that we have two ways of getting up in the morning. We have Alexa and our phone. We have an alarm clock and our phone. And this is just an example of looking at obstacles, planning how you're going to overcome those obstacles before they ever happen. And although this is an executive function approach, it's the same thing as the parenting techniques that you all know, I'm sure, that when your child is in the midst of a tantrum, that's not the time that you're going to have a calm, reasonable discussion with them. You're going to wait until they're calm to have that discussion and to reflect. So with goal setting, you sort of preempting what obstacles may stand in the way. Teachers use this in school if they give children an assignment and they have to do a certain amount of reading between now and Christmas, and it's supposed to be independent reading. They'll ask kids to plan out how they're going to do it, and then what are some of the obstacles that may come in the way: traveling, a younger brother who wants you to play a game, etc. And then how they will overcome those obstacles. So another can-do goal, another goal rather of executive function is organization. So just take a moment and just read through these on your own. I'll give you a few seconds and see if you can answer these questions. If you can answer the questions, then you have a good idea about the organizational approach that your child has and that your child's school has. Because kids who have their assignments, if you know how your child organizes assignments, and now because you've been home with them for so many months, you should have a very good idea about how they organize their work and whether or not everything is on the class page, etc., or what is their responsibility. Do they use different binders, different folders on the computer? Do they physically have folders? My suggestion is for children who do have the physical folders where it's not all on the computer, the folders should be different colors. This makes it much easier for them to find in their backpack when they're looking for it. When the teacher says, take out your math homework, and rather than going through all the notebooks, they know that green is math. Sometimes kids have homework folders for different subject areas. So that's also a very good strategy when they're packing up their backpack the night before they're going to school, to make sure it's not, do you have your math? Do you have your English? Do you have your social studies? Do you have your purple folder? Where's the green folder? Because kids are very attuned to color. So I would definitely make that suggestion that you try that with your kids. Do you know what type of backpack they use and how they organize it? Backpacks have a variety of zippers and places to put things, and a kid should approach it in an organized way, and you can help them do that. So things just don't happen haphazardly. What does a child's workspace look like? And what do they do with papers that they don't think they need but are afraid to throw away? This is a big one, and we'll get to that in a second. So here's a kid's workstation, and it needs some help. And I would say that when you are helping your child, if the area where they work, and somebody said to me, everybody has a WeWorks in their house now. If your child has a dedicated place where he or she is working, and if it looks like this, or it's really messy, don't start getting into any sort of hassle with them. Just go in and take a photo before you do anything else. And then when this workstation is cleaned up and organized, which you can help your child with, or if it's an older child, you can tell them to do it on their own. And then when you come and look at it, you can just give some suggestions if you have any. But so you have a photo of when it's messy. And then here you have a photo of a very neat workstation. And this happens to be the workstation of Erica's daughter, who's now in middle school. So if she's able to maintain this type of workstation before she begins her work each day, she will be in very good shape in terms of being organized. So then what happens, so you went from a messy desk to a clean desk. You take a photo of this clean workspace, this organized workspace as well. And then all you have to do when your child's desk area reverts back is say, you know what, why don't we take a look at that photo of the organized desk? Do you think you can get your desk back to that shape? That's a much better approach than arguing with your kid, and it also is getting them to become much more of an independent learner. So part of this workstation should have the pens, pencil, markers, whatever your child is going to need to be able to do their work at home. And then for young children especially, there's something called a things to remember list to laminate and attach to a backpack. Now, I know in Scarsdale right now there's a hybrid model with kids going to school a few days a week and then home. And then this may change. Erica was telling me it may change at the end of the month, or it may not, depending on what happens over Thanksgiving. But it's really, really hard to keep track of everything you need and when you're going to school, when you're going to be working from home. And especially if you as a parent also are working, there are just a lot of balls in the air. So in addition to taking photos, I'm going to recommend something else that you can try. So this is an example of what we did at the Churchill School. And we gave this to the kids, and it was the size of a business card. And we got everybody these clear plastic like luggage tags, which you can buy online for just a few cents each. And then the inserts, the index cards, were changed every day. So a child has this, they're in school, and they are going to fill out the luggage tag, the card that says to home. And that's to make sure they have everything with them before they leave school, that it's all in their backpack. And then when they are home, they're going to fill out the other side. Do they have everything they need to go back to school the following day? So the night before, they should be filling out this side of the luggage tag. And what I suggest is that you put a few blank luggage tags in the inserts in the luggage tag, so that when the kid gets back to school, they can take out the old one and start filling out a new one. This is something that we tried with kids with language-based learning disabilities, and it saved a lot of tears, it saved a lot of arguing, especially for younger children. Again, if your child isn't reading, you can do little pictures of all of these different things. They don't have to be able to read the words. So now we're going to talk a little bit about time management. And this is so ironic. This cartoon is from 1997, so it's 23 years ago. And it said, I couldn't do my homework because my computer has a virus, and so do all my pencils and pens. So we want to get rid of the virus for sure. Every virus you can think of, we want to get rid of it. And time management and strategies for homework help with that. So another thing, how to make morning times calmer for time management. Establish and review the morning routine. Together with your child, create a chart that details the sequence of morning activities. So this again is connected to if you had a can-do goal of making morning time calmer, this might be one of the strategies that you put into place, would be to create a chart that has all the morning activities we need to do. And I mean all of them, especially for young children. When they get up in the morning, they have to use the bathroom, they have to brush their teeth, they have to either shower or wash, have breakfast, get dressed. Whatever order you think they should be doing it in, you work with them on that to create that chart. If they have to make their bed, they have to get their books together. So this would be very helpful if they had a routine and a chart that they could actually look at and check off as they go through the different activities. Not every child needs this, but if your child does, this is a very good way of doing it without getting into a hassle, without saying, do you have your lunch? Did you brush your teeth? Did you comb your hair? Why don't you have your sneakers with you? You won't have to do all that because they will have something to refer to. Making decisions the night before, and this is certainly an easy one, is selecting clothes the night before. It's really easy for us to do that. We know enough about the weather forecast to know what the weather is going to be like. And again, get that backpack packed the night before as much as possible. And if your child is going to school, that backpack should be by the front door the night before. If your child is working from home, the contents of that backpack should be at the workstation. Or I know a lot of kids like working from home with the backpack just sitting near their desk chair. How to make morning times calmer. I don't think there's any magic to any of this. There is a few of these I've read about social emotional intelligence for kids. And one of them was awaken your child with a gentle touch and decide with your child what that touch will be. Let light in the room. Plan a breakfast that works for you and your child. Again, you're doing it with your child. And reward your child for following the morning routine. It could mean additional time reading a story to them. It could mean additional time playing a game. So whatever it is, you're going to come up with those rewards with your child. And as I said, it doesn't mean you're buying them a car.
Jane, let somebody else in.
Ooh, sorry. What happened? That part of the screen goes away.
I know.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I think
he's gonna come in 1 minute.
No problem. I think
he wants to say hi.
Okay. Oops. Okay. So here's something I don't know if any of you.
Oh, whoever just joined, can you mute yourself, or Jane? Maybe you can mute them.
I think everybody's muted now. So you may be familiar with this gadget. You can find it online very easily. And for children who, if you're working on time management with your child, the challenge really is for those children who don't yet know how to tell time. And certainly for children who don't understand the passage of time. So it's the old, are we there yet routine. And actually, I know that there are parents who have put this in the car when they do go on a trip because they no longer have to keep answering, are we there yet? So what happens with this, it says here, by giving your child the independence and confidence to track their own time while learning at home, you can help ease the transition to in-home learning. So again, this is really recent from Time Timer. So how this works is if you had, if your child was going to do something for 40 minutes, let's say there was a homework assignment that they were working on, and it was they thought it would take them about 40 minutes. And we'll talk in a little bit about how you estimate time. You set up the timer, and so you see the red is set for 40 minutes. As time passes, as you get closer to 0, the red disappears. And then there's no ticking, so that part is not distracting. And at the end, when the time is up, when the 40 minutes are up, there's an option to have a signal so that they know that the time is up. This is amazingly effective for kids because they can now have a visual of time passing. They don't know how to read a watch. They just have to know that they go from a lot of red showing to not a lot, to no red showing. And clearly, the more you use this with a child, the more they will get to understand the passage of time. That's why I said it also might be something that would be effective to use in the car when you're going on a trip. So now let's talk a little bit more about homework. So I know that most of the kids are using some sort of online mechanism to record their homework assignments. And this is something that you can, a chart that you can make for your child and with your child to help them with homework completion. So it's much, much easier today for kids to know what their assignment is. You know, I'm sure when you went to school, your teachers may not have had the homework online, even if they were using the computer, they weren't using class pages, or some teachers felt at the beginning when computers were being used that it was still very important for kids to write down their assignments in an assignment book. I think those days are leaving us, but let's assume that your child knows what the assignment is, either because it's online on the class page, they've copied it down if they had to when they were in the classroom, or they called a friend, but they know what the assignment is. And let's say it's a math assignment. How long do they think it's going to take them to do that math assignment? Now, at the beginning, it's not so easy for kids to estimate. And again, this is for children who I would say have a better sense of time and may know how to tell time, may know how to read a clock, and have a better sense of the passage of time. So generally, you're talking about children in 3rd grade and up. It may be not until 4th grade, or you may have some precocious 2nd grader who absolutely could do something like this. But all you're asking your child to do is to figure out this math assignment. How long do you think it will take you? Oh, you think it will take 20 minutes. Great. When they start the math assignment, they should be looking at the time, and they can write down the time in the same box. And then when the time is, or they can write down the time here, let's say they started it at 4 p.m. And when the time is over, they calculate how long did it actually take. Because they may have thought it would take 20 minutes, but it actually took only 10 minutes. So as kids do this more often, they get used to estimating more accurately. Why is it important to do this? You have math homework, you have an essay you have to write, you have some social studies work you have to do, you have to work on your science project. It's important because there are a limited number of hours in a day. And I know I was a Scarsdale parent, and it may not be that way during COVID, but I'm sure your children are involved in several after-school activities. So their actual time available to do homework is limited. So what you want to try and do is help your child estimate the amount of time, record the actual time, and then also when they get their homework, and They know they have math, they have reading, and they have social studies, for example. What order are they going to do that homework in? Are they going to do the math first or last? These are the types of decisions that your child should be making. Again, remember the long-term goal, independent learner. Some people say that you should always start with the most difficult assignment first because you get it out of the way and then everything else seems so much easier. That's true for some kids. Other kids need to start with the homework that's easiest so they get it out of the way quickly, they feel good about themselves, and they can move on to the next subject area. I don't have the answer for you for that. I think it's a discussion that you have to have with your child. And what I would suggest is you try it one way and then let them try it the other way. Let them do the easiest first, and then after a few days of doing it like that, let them reverse it to the most difficult. And tell them that you're doing an experiment with them. And let's see which works out better. So the last column here is when that homework is done, they're going to check off that their homework is done. So this homework assignment book is not a regular assignment book. This is for kids to be able to become more independent and accountable for figuring out how long it will take them to do their work, the order in which they want to do it, and then obviously checking off when it's done. And they should have some sort of a system that when it's done, it goes into the backpack. And you could actually make another column that says in backpack if they are going to be returning to school. Why is it important for kids to do this? Well, if they only have 90 minutes for homework and they look at everything that they have to do and they estimate that they need 120 minutes, something's going to have to give. So it's important that rather than a parent always saying, you're going to run out of time, let the child see it in black and white. And I'm going to talk now about when you're thinking of setting up a grid with your child of the hours that they have to do their work every day of the week, what you have to take into account. Now we're talking, obviously, this is time management. So there are 3 types of do's that we have to consider when we want to manage our time. And this goes for children and for adults. We have the must-do's. And you can, if you're working with your child on this, you can do it just like this. You have the must-do's and say to them, what are some of our must-do's? We have the want-to's. Now, if you look at this list, some of you may say, well, wait a second, if my child is taking piano lessons, that's not a want to, that's a must to. That's fine. You are the one to decide with your child what is a must do, what is a want to, and then the last one is a could do, which doesn't really have a set time frame. So it really is whatever extra available time there is. Some people call it obligations, aspirations, and negotiations. But I just say must do, want to, could do. So how do you manage this? Well, let's see. You take that list, must do, want to, could do, and then you put it into a weekly planner. So for our purposes, if you have a child who is going to school every day, the must do's, could do's, wanna do's are really not going to start before the afternoon because we know that they're in school for the beginning of the day. If your child is on a hybrid schedule and they have, I know Erica was telling me that there could be some days when a child has a phys ed class but nothing else, or a phys ed and a writing class but nothing else. It's very helpful, and I suspect that many of you have already done this, is you put in when they are actually in school or when they are on Zoom school. And you just put the hours down here and fill in the blanks for Monday to Friday. You'll see once they have those hours filled in, how much of the day is left for them to do the must-dos, want-tos, and could-dos. And that also really depends on the age of your child and when they are going to go to sleep at night. Don't forget, the must-dos should include eating dinner, doing chores, things that are absolutely required for your child. So when you put in the must-dos and then you put in the want-tos on a planner, your child will see, again, it's a great visual. Where do they have time to do things like playing a video game, updating their Facebook page, etc.? So they'll be able to see very easily where and when they have time. I always think it's an eye-opener for parents as well, because in pre-COVID time, and I'm sure in post-COVID time, since our kids have been home so much, we're going to want to have them involved in a lot of after-school activities, a lot of opportunities to be with other kids for sports, for performing arts, fine arts, certain clubs, etc. But there are only a certain number of hours in a day. And you want to be able to look at your child's schedule and see what is realistic for them to be able to do. You do not want to overschedule your child, because an overscheduled child leads to a very anxious child. You're all trying to be the best parents that you can be and give your kids all the opportunities that you could possibly give them. But sometimes they just need some downtime. So look at that weekly planner. So now you have the weekly planner, and the weekly planner includes homework. They have their assignment. They've estimated how long they think it should take. So here are just some other suggestions to make homework time calmer. So encourage your child to talk about what went right at school today. I know very often when kids come home, they remember what went wrong, but they really don't remember what went right. So that's what you really want to try and focus on with your child. Plan a consistent start time for homework. That may be a different time each day, but every Monday they're going to start at X time. Every Tuesday they're going to start at another time. Try to come up with a consistent time. So again, you're going to have to take into account play dates that they have after school. The third one is very important. Be nearby and available in case your child needs help. Again, our goal is to have the children be independent, but being realistic, it's important that you be around or a caregiver be around when they need help. That's why so many kids have their workstation somewhere in the kitchen. So if your child has their workstation set up in their bedroom, but you're finding that they need a lot of help and they truly need this help, and you're running from, if you're trying to prepare dinner and you have to go from the kitchen back to their room and back again, and then it's anxiety provoking and frustrating for you, talk about maybe they need a different location for the workstation. The next one is very, very important, and that's to take breaks. Kids need to take breaks. Some kids need more frequent short breaks, like they may need a 5-minute break every 25 minutes. Some kids can go 40 minutes before they need a break. Some kids can only go 15 minutes before they need a break. You know your child, and we're not talking about children that have ADHD. All children need breaks. They need to get up and move around. There are tons of apps out now that can help them with some mindfulness if they want to do that. And so one of the suggestions that I have for the breaks is, with your child, talk about taking breaks while they're doing their homework and what kinds of things they could do or they would want to do if they had a 5-minute break or if they had a 10-minute break. I would just start with that. Make a list cut strips with the different break suggestions on each strip, put them into a bowl or a hat or a basket or something, and when it's time for a break, let your child pick one from that basket. It becomes a kind of game, and kids really enjoy that, especially younger children. Again, you also want to plan for a fun activity afterwards. It's very important, especially in COVID days, that our kids actually have time to have fun away from their screens. And so if you can plan a family game, a game that the kids can play on their own or with you or with a sibling, that would be a really good fun activity. If they want to help you with cooking and it's something that you enjoy doing with them, I would say that that's another really good activity. So older kids, you want to take their if in elementary school, sometimes the teachers now are giving the kids an assignment that's not due for a week or two. You're going to help your child break that assignment down into small tasks. And one way of doing that is by back channeling it. You're going to start with the due date and work backwards so that they know and they can set up a schedule for completing each subtask. Very often teachers do this with children, but sometimes they don't. They make some assumptions that the kids are organized enough that they can figure it out. And all the teachers do is may say during class, 5 days and your project on Alaska is due. Well, maybe the teacher started with 10 days until your project with Alaska is due and your child hasn't started yet. So make sure that you help them set up the smaller tasks. And again, that could go on the planner. So we did some time management, we did some organization and some can-do goals and homework. And let's just talk for a minute or two because I want to have time for questions. What else can parents do to facilitate growth in a child's executive function skills? Clearly, mindfulness is definitely something that we can all benefit from. And you'll be getting a list of these resources, but it's been proven that mindfulness really does help kids improve their behavior, and more than that, it helps them with their attention and with their anxiety. This started to become popular a few years ago, and there were a lot of naysayers, and I have to say that I wasn't convinced that mindfulness was going to be that helpful, but I've seen it work. I've seen changes in kids. And so they may even be doing this in school. They may even be doing this as part of their Zoom lessons. But if they are not, there are several apps. I think everybody knows about the Calm app, but there are a lot of other apps that kids can use. And I'm giving you a website from understood.org that has several suggestions. It helps kids get in touch with themselves, be more self-aware. We talked about metacognition, understanding themselves as a learner. This is also just understanding who they are. So if you haven't done this already, in order for your child to understand what mindfulness is, if they haven't done it in school, you need to model for them. And when you see that your child is anxious, don't just say, well, this has to be done or you have to get through it. Encourage them to stop and for a minute or two and to notice how they're feeling. When they start to get anxious, what is happening to them? Do they get a knot in their stomach? Are their hands getting clammy? Do they start to, have to touch their head, etc.? Let them become more aware of their bodies and how their bodies are reacting when they seem to be anxious. Again, when kids notice that they're drifting, and one of the mindfulness activities is to take a deep breath, we have seen that this really does help kids get back to being able to focus. So, very, very important to praise your child. I know this is a really frustrating time for all of us, and there is a lot of anxiety, and you're trying to juggle so many different roles at once. And when you have some goals that you and your child have decided upon, or they followed through with something that you've asked them to do, make sure that you give them praise immediately. Everybody loves praise. And we call it labeled praise. So it's not just thanks for getting ready in the morning. It's thank you for getting your backpack organized when I asked you to. So you're being very specific, and they understand what it is that you're praising them for. And you're even going a step further. Now we can get out of the house on time tomorrow. So you're giving them a reason for why you're praising. It's like cause and effect. Let the child know that you know he or she worked hard to accomplish the goal. I think we very often do that with our kids when we see a test score that goes from a 75 to an 80, and we let them know that we know how hard they work. But for some kids, just keeping their desk neat, just being able to have all of their materials handy, just being able to get through their homework is quite a goal, and they need to be praised for being able to accomplish that goal. And again, encourage flexibility. So if it's very important, the best schedules that we have for our kids, the best routines are all subject to change. So some kids are fine. They're very flexible. You have to change the schedule. They roll with it. Some kids do not. So the more that you know beforehand where you can preview a change in schedule, the better off you will be. For everything from we're not having dinner tonight at 6 o'clock, we're going to be having it at 6:30. We have to leave for the dentist at 4:30, and it's now 3:30, so you'll have an hour to do whatever homework it is. Make sure that they have a preview as much as possible. In kindergarten, we do that all the time with kids, and in first grade when they're playing, when they're in the block area and the doll area, etc. Teachers always do this. They'll give them a 5-minute notice before it's time to clean up. You don't just say to a child, okay, now we're going to do reading after you've been playing for 20 minutes. You have to give them a chance to clean up. You have to preview it with them that we're going to be reading in 5 minutes. So we now have to start cleaning up, or we're going to be reading in 10 minutes. So in 5 minutes, I'm going to shut the lights so that we can start to clean up. Try to maintain the schedules, but also understand that there will be changes. As I said before, break down tasks, build in choice. Kids absolutely should have choice. And if you see that your child is struggling, especially in the homework area or in getting ready for school in the morning, you need to adjust that time so that they have some additional time. So it shouldn't be so frustrating to them. And then again, these are a whole bunch of resources, and there's just one that I want to point out. Obviously, the Developing Child site at Harvard has a lot of stuff. Common Sense has a lot of materials on it. But there's one website here called understood.org, which was originally developed for parents of children with disabilities, mostly with learning disabilities. I think this is an amazing website, and it has suggestions for all kids. A lot of the suggestions that I've talked about this evening and others to make your child's life easier, and obviously your life easier as well. And then several of the strategies that I use are from a website called smarts-ef.org. And they have a blog with a lot of suggestions as well. So I will stop sharing because I've done a lot of talking, and I'd like to open it up to questions. So if you have a question, I'm gonna, oh, Mickey, I'm sorry, I just saw that now. I'm gonna unmute all of you. Okay. And if you have a question or if you want to write it in the chat, why don't you do that?
Jane, I think someone had asked about mindfulness resources for children. That was one question that I see in the chat box.
Yeah. So I think when you get the resources, you'll see that there's a website for mindfulness. Let's see. Yeah. Um, and you'll be getting that. That's in the resources that Erica's going to send out to you tomorrow. Any other questions?
Jane, you answered everything. No one has any questions. People are just probably processing all of the wonderful information.
Well, I hope you can use some of the strategies. As a school administrator in Westchester and as a parent of children who went through elementary through high school in Scarsdale, I know the level of expectations that you have for your kids and the expectations that the teachers have for your kids. And it's not easy to be a child going to school in Scarsdale. I can tell you just from my own experience with my children that when they got to college, for one of my kids, he said that college was a lot easier than high school. So, obviously he knew how to manage his time, etc. I mean, the goal for all of this is that as your kids get older, you want to be able to keep taking a step back from their day-to-day responsibilities that have to do with school. And having the executive function skills will help them do that.
Jane, there's a question in the chat. How do you know if your child needs professional assessment or intervention?
Okay. So, I am a special educator. That's my hat. That's one of the hats that I wear. If you have had parent conferences and the teachers are concerned about your child and concerned about their academic progress, that it seems that they either need a lot of repetition or they're not getting it, or they don't seem to have the attention and the focus. And again, you may be seeing that at home. You've been your child's teacher for the last 6 months, so you may see that as well. That's something where the first person to go to might be, after the teacher, might be the pediatrician. Because what I don't like is when people jump to conclusions. So somebody says, the teacher says, your child, it seems to lose focus in class. And everybody's light bulb says, oh my God, ADHD. No, it could be that your child is slower in processing, or they may have a language delay. So if they can't follow what's going on, clearly they're not going to be paying attention because it's just frustrating to them. So that's not the same as a child who has ADHD. So if you have questions about that for your child, then it's time to go for a professional assessment. You always can start with the school and ask the teacher if she or he thinks your child should be assessed to see whether or not they have some sort of a learning challenge, whether it's a learning disability or a language-based learning disability or ADHD. Those are the most common disabilities that we see in kids in school, or difference, and they can be evaluated. So you can do it privately, but certainly you can also start with the school.
Any other questions? Oh, there's a follow-up.
Yeah. Okay, so if the school doesn't see it, then if it's something that's really bothering you, then I absolutely think you should go and have your child evaluated. I've had a lot of experience in Edgemont, obviously, because I was a school administrator there, and in Scarsdale, because when I was a special ed director, I used to meet with the Scarsdale special ed director very frequently, and we would commiserate on our issues in common. It's not often that it's not often that a Scarsdale teacher would not say something to a parent if they see a child struggling. But with that in mind, when I was in Edgemont, in one year, I was a special ed director, I was finding that we were getting a lot of referrals for kids who needed to be evaluated. And then in the end, they didn't have a learning disability. They didn't have ADHD. So here's what I found. And again, I'm Dr. Gertler, but I'm not a scientist. But from my observation, in school districts like Scarsdale, the bell curve is not your typical bell curve. So a child who may be not learning disabled and not have ADHD, but is not at the top of their class in Scarsdale, teachers and or parents may think that something's wrong. And there isn't anything wrong. It's just that bell curve and the pool that they're working with is starting at a higher level. And I think that's very important, because I don't think a child should be labeled as having a learning disability if they do not have a learning disability. If it's because they happen to be in a class where they're with all superstars. And that's where you see a lot of kids get very anxious, because there's nothing wrong, but they can't keep up. So it may be that their processing is not as good as some other kids. And there are things that the teacher should be able to do for that. So again, if you are really concerned, yes, I would say go ahead and have a private evaluation, but I would let the school know that you are concerned and you are going to pursue this, because I think the parent-school collaboration can go very far. If your child if they have reading groups, for example, and your child's in 4th grade and has always been in one of what would be considered the lowest reading group or one of the bottom 2 reading groups, then absolutely you should be doing why is that? It may not be a disability, but it's certainly worth finding out.
Any other questions? Okay.
That's it.
Well, I want to thank the Fox Meadow PTA for the opportunity to share this executive function workshop, and Dr. Gertler for her tremendously helpful guidance. I've heard this presentation before, but I learn new things every time. I really do. I'm going to try those break strips. I think that's a really, really good one. So if anyone has any follow-up questions for Dr. Gertler, or would like to schedule a parenting session or perhaps arrange a tutor for your child, please feel free to reach out. And as Dr. Gertler said, tomorrow we will be sending follow-up slides with some of the information that was shared tonight. So thank you again so much for joining us, and please be in touch and hang in there.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.